J'ouvre maintenant la
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 39 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. Pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, June 1st, 2022, the committee is meeting to study Bill C-235, an act respecting the building of a green economy in the prairies. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House of Order of Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. And so you've already are familiar with the rules. Before I begin, I'd like to point out that today we have Mr. Remy Trudel, who is a former provincial minister in charge of several departments. So we're very pleased to see him here. And we also have his master's students at ENAP who are visiting the House of Commons. So welcome to our committee. And I'd simply like to advise you, colleagues, and advise the public that Mr. Cliff Cullen, the Minister of Economic Development, Investment and Trade of Manitoba, will not be able to be with us for the first hour. So the witnesses that we had scheduled for the second hour, Alberta beef producers, Mark Lindsay Lead, Government Relations and Policy, and Dr. Melanie Walk, Chair, are appearing by video conference. We also have from Chemical Corporation, Dale Austin, Head, Government Relations. And finally, from the Canadian Cattle Association, we have Mr. Dennis Kraft, Executive Vice President, and Mr. Tyler Fulton, Officer at Large, who will be appearing by video conference. Before I turn the floor over to the witnesses today, I would like to point out that Mr. Chair, can I ensure that the tests, the sound tests were made beforehand to make sure that the sound is appropriate? Yes, we will ensure that the sound is good before the testimony begins. So we will now elect a vice chair.
The first vice chair must be a member of the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motions for the first vice chair. Mr. Fillmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to propose the member for South Shore St. Margaret's, Rick Perkins, to the role of Vice Chair.
It's been moved by Andy Fillmore that Rick Perkins be elected as first Vice Chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion? I declare the motion carried and Rick Perkins duly elected first Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore.
Well, congratulations, Mr. Perkins. It's a pleasure to have you join the committee and to have you as vice chair. You have big foots to fill with Mr. Cram, who's going to be leaving us. But congratulations, and this election is in the spirit of this committee. We work very collaboratively, which is something I much appreciate. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Perkins. So congratulations. And without further ado, if Dr. Walk from the Alberta Beef Producers is ready for a 5-minute testimony, the floor would be yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the House of Commons of Canada's Standing Committee on Industry and Technology for the chance to speak on behalf of the Alberta Beef Producers today. My name is Melanie Woke. I am a veterinarian and rancher from Beauval in Alberta. I'm here today as the chair of the Alberta Beef Producers, an elected producer-led organization representing 18,000 producers. ABP's Government Relations and Policy Lead, Mark Lysing, is also here with us today. My children and I will be the 5th generation stewards of the land and along with my husband represent the Métis Nation. I hope you all have had the pleasure of driving through our prairie landscape and experienced beauty. When you see prairie, true rolling prairies with native grassland communities, that land is managed by beef producers. And as one of those beef producers, I am excited to see attention towards greening the prairie economies. Our industry perfectly fits as an economic generating industry that provides environmental benefits. Beef producers are stewards of the land, holding a unique symbiotic relationship with the rangelands we manage. We invest and work diligently to ensure our rangelands are healthy. A healthy rangeland provides forage for our cattle. The rangeland, the entire ecosystem, and society benefit from these healthy native ecosystems as they support the sequestration of carbon, purification of water, and maintenance of critical wildlife habitat. Grasslands are woefully undervalued in their contribution to the carbon cycle. It's estimated that globally, grasslands store approximately 34% of the terrestrial stock of carbon. And what's great about grasslands is that most of the carbons they store is below ground, about 97%, which safeguards it from disturbances such as fire. Unfortunately, if these grasslands are tilled for cultivated land or developed for housing, up to 50% of the carbon storage is lost forever. Cattle, being continually amazing, convert plant protein on marginal lands not suitable for cultivation into the nutrient-dense protein source we consume. The cattle industry also provides more than just carbon storage and sequestration. The Prairie Conservation Forum wrote in 2021 that without native prairie, there is no wildlife. We certainly see our share of wildlife on our ranch, and many species look to beef producers' pastures for habitat. In fact, in Alberta, 85% of the species at risk are found on native grasslands. Many of these species are endangered because of habitat loss, which includes an estimated 74% loss of Alberta's grassland habitat. Beef producers have safeguarded the remaining grasslands and the ecological goods and services they provide through our daily practices. In this way, our industry is unique. We are compatible with native ecosystems and add economic value to the maintenance of these ecosystems. In Alberta, beef producers contribute over $4 billion to the provincial GDP, including $2.7 billion in labor income. And the cattle sector then generates over 55,000 jobs, with each of these yielding another 2.7 jobs elsewhere in the economy. We are an industry that is continually moving forward, striving for efficiencies and more effective management practices. We have to allow our businesses to survive. We've seen continued evolution in range management, even in my time as a rancher. We are producing more pounds of beef, using less feed and less water. Though these positive moves are driven by farmer and rancher passion for their craft, and in many cases are supported by producer organization and industry initiatives through research such as with our Living Labs partnership with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. There have been many changes on Alberta's rangelands over the last decades, from the adoption of rotational grazing methods to shifts in cattle genetics. Other subtle shifts include some ranchers in the province, for example, who voluntarily transformed their traditional fencing into pronghorn and antelope-friendly fencing to allow the safe migration of the species. In recent years, industry-driven initiatives such as certification through the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef and Verified Beef Production Plus have acted as a benchmark for producers. These initiatives push us to improve management practices while exploring new possibilities in marketing. There are numerous examples of how farmers and ranchers, industry and government have worked and continue to work together to support the continuity of the rangelands and the environment. And these partnerships can definitely be successful. To succeed, we first need to acknowledge the significant positive contributions of prairie grasslands in all green economy and environmental discussions. It is widely acknowledged that forested lands offer much in sequestration, but we often overlook the native prairie. We need also to consider the varied opportunities for producers based on their ecoregion, the native species present, and habitats they're supporting, as well as their business models. In other words, collaborative initiatives cannot have a blanket approach. They must either be flexible to a large region or specific to the local communities and individuals involved. And to achieve all that, we need to give beef producers, who are the proud champions of the varied prairie ecosystems, and Canadian agricultural leaders, a seat at the table. The agriculture industry needs to be involved in the collaboration, right from goal development through to implementation and assessment. The beef industry of Alberta would like to contribute. Thank you again, Chair and Standing Committee members.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wook. We'll now turn to Camco Corporation with Mr. Austin, who's with us here today. So, Mr. Austin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to appear at committee today on behalf of Camco Corporation to provide input to your study on Bill C-235. The bill and the committee study of it are of particular interest to Cameco. Headquartered in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Cameco is one of the world's largest producers of uranium for nuclear energy and is the world's largest publicly traded uranium company. We're uniquely situated with operations across the nuclear fuel cycle, including in mining, refining, conversion, and fuel manufacturing. The majority of our operations are located in Saskatchewan and Ontario, and our total Canadian workforce stands at just over 2,900 employees and long-term contractors. Cameco is a proud and important part of Canada's nuclear and critical minerals supply chains that deliver reliable, emissions-free electricity in Ontario, New Brunswick, and around the world. Canada's uranium and nuclear fuel sectors already play a significant role in underpinning green, low-carbon economies and are positioned to lead the transition to net zero emissions by providing highly skilled, well-paying jobs, engaging suppliers in a wide range of skilled trades and expertise, and stimulating innovation in a variety of nuclear disciplines, including small modular reactors. Cameco is well positioned to provide input to and support the development of a framework for a green prairie economy that considers all forms of low-carbon energy and the role that they will play in electricity generation and in industrial and transportation-related emissions reductions. As the committee considers what building a green economy in the prairies might entail, we must also recognize that Indigenous partnerships and Indigenous businesses will play a major role. As you may be aware, Cameco is one of the largest employers of Indigenous people in Canada, with about half the workforce at our mines and mills in northern Saskatchewan being residents from within the region. But beyond employment, over 80% of the services used at Cameco's mines and mills in northern Saskatchewan, totaling more than $4 billion since 2004, are procured from northern Indigenous businesses. Our success depends on the long-term positive partnerships, mutual trust we've built with First Nations and Métis communities where we operate, particularly in northern Saskatchewan. A green economy in the prairies will also require Indigenous partnerships and strong Indigenous businesses along the entire value chain to maximize future success. A significant number of economic, energy, environmental, and national security policies being pursued by the Government of Canada, including the contents of this bill, are focused on achieving net zero emissions. It is Cameco's view that there is no path to net zero without nuclear energy. We were pleased to see nuclear energy mentioned in the content of the framework. I might, however, disagree with its characterization as a new source of energy. Access to significant amounts of reliable, emissions-free baseload electricity is the foundation for any green economy. Current use of nuclear energy worldwide helps the planet avoid some 2.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year. Cameco is very proud of our contribution to global greenhouse gas reduction efforts from our home base in Saskatoon. Saskatchewan uranium facilitates the generation of clean, carbon-free baseload electricity that will power the transition to a low-carbon economy. That said, there are mixed signals coming from the federal government regarding the use of nuclear technologies to achieve climate goals and to support the transition to a green economy. The Government of Canada's climate policy framework clearly includes nuclear energy in its clean and low-carbon technology definition. However, recent decisions that excluded nuclear technologies from the tax rate reduction for zero-emission technology manufacturing and Canada's Green Bond Framework send mixed signals to markets and investors. Nuclear energy is a clean, carbon-free source of electricity. We ask that as the framework for a green prairie economy is being developed, that governments take a technology-agnostic approach and consider all emissions reduction technologies on a level playing field for inclusion in government programs and investments. The most effective path to a low-carbon economy will require the targeted, fit-for-purpose use of all types of zero-emission energy technologies. Canada's and the prairie's resource wealth has long been a major driver of our financial health, socio-economic well-being, and job creation efforts. The bill's proposal to develop a framework for a green prairie economy could provide an opportunity to enhance and modernize the prairie resource sector's economic contributions and solidify our reputation as a responsible resource developer that meets the standards of ESG investors. Canada's economic prosperity is to a significant extent linked to our ability to responsibly and sustainably develop and export our abundant natural resources and the value-added products that are produced from them. Cameco supports the intent of Bill C-235 to work with provincial governments, Indigenous governing bodies, and the private sector to develop a framework for a green prairie economy. We ask that all zero-emission technologies, including nuclear, be given the same consideration as the framework is being developed. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Without further ado, we will now turn the floor over to our final witness, and I believe that's Mr. Laycraft. The floor is yours. Or, I don't know, maybe Mr. Fulton is speaking?
Yeah, thank you for having us today, and good afternoon. I'm Tyler Fulton, a beef cattle producer based in Birtle, Manitoba. I'm currently the president of Manitoba Beef Producers and an officer at large with the Canadian Cattle Association. I'm honored to be here today to discuss the opportunities in the prairies to build a green economy and how that impacts cattle producers. Beef cattle production in the prairie provinces represents a large portion of our sector and one of the largest economic contributors in the region. We in the beef cattle industry are proud to be one of Canada's largest agricultural sectors, supporting 348,000 jobs, contributing 21.8 billion to GDP, while also conserving 44 million acres of important grassland ecosystem that stores 1.5 billion tons of carbon. But it doesn't stop there. Beef cattle production in Canada is leading the way internationally in terms of sustainable production practices. While production methods differ by region and landscape, our goal is aligned: to contribute to Canada's economy while conserving and protecting Canada's environmental landscape. It is beef farmers and ranchers' best interest to preserve the environment we are always striving for. Striving for continuous improvement. The Canadian Beef Advisors, alongside the robust membership of the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, made scientifically sound environment goals leading into 2030. These goals are ambitious but measurable, and we have a plan on how we can achieve these goals. We are committed to continuous improvement and leaving the environment in a better position for the next generation of beef cattle producers. For example, 33% of emissions intensity reduction by 2030, sequester an additional 3.4 million tons of carbon every year, and maintain 35 million acres of native grasslands. These efforts have us excited about both the environmental and economic future of Canada's beef industry. When we look specifically at Bill C-235 and developing a framework for the green prairie economy, we have a few comments for the committee's consideration. First, it is essential to include cattle producers during the development phase. The prairies have a large agriculture economic presence, and primary producers are the subject matter experts, including agricultural advisors, will be for long-lasting success. Number two, the Canadian beef sector is confident in our 2030 goals, and we recommend any framework is built from starting with industry-led goals. This will ensure we're working toward achieving shared objectives with an incentive-based approach. As innovation and research continues around sustainability, there are tools coming to light that do have some public good. However, these result in added costs for producers. And I need to emphasize that primary producers cannot pass these costs along, which will make the tools economically unsustainable. Looking to install those tools in a regular practice will not happen on its own, and a regulatory push would be costly and generally ineffective. We've seen how a regulatory approach drives up costs and exports production to other jurisdictions. Canada has one of the leading sustainable beef production systems in the world, with less than half the global greenhouse gas emission average. If there are regulatory and cost burdens on producers, it becomes unattainable to maintain production effectively in Canada. This will have the negative impact on our domestic and global food security. It will also have a severe negative consequence on Canada's landscapes without producers stewarding the land with their cattle. Third would be specifically in the content section under subsection C of Bill C-235. It notes to prioritize projects that generate natural infrastructure and a clean environment. Given the landscape that cattle graze in the prairies, we strongly encourage cattle production to be included given our positive contribution to biodiversity, temperate native grasslands, and the many species at risk that live on these pasture lands. When we're discussing greening the economy in the prairies, the temperate native grasslands are a key consideration. While Bill C-235 mentions forests and forestry multiple times, there is no reference to grasslands. Analysis by Nature Conservancy of Canada shows that on average, over the past 25 years, roughly 148,000 acres of temperate native grassland has been lost through conversion each year. This doesn't include the tame pastures and haylands, which also are being lost at a similar rate. These losses are detrimental to key environment and climate change objectives. And in fact, a recent study by Nature United identified stopping this loss as the #1 solution we have for natural climate solutions. Canadian cattle producers are well positioned to be part of the climate change solution and help conserve these grasslands while contributing to Canada's economy. And on that note, I would invite members of the committee to watch the short documentary titled Guardians of the Grasslands. It is available online, and we can share the film with the committee members following today's meeting. Thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fulton. And yes, if you could provide the link to this documentary to the committee via the clerk, that would be much appreciated. Et sans plus tarder, je passerai la parole à Madame.
Without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Mrs. Wagenthal for 6 minutes.
Pour commencer la discussion.
Thank you so much, Chair. Appreciate all of you being here today. I'm here as a Member of Parliament for Saskatchewan. Very pleased to have you here, Mr. Austin, as well as to hear about the grasslands, because clearly in our province there's much going on in regard to protecting our environment and ensuring that it is there for generations to come in the way that it should be. Agriculture, oil and gas, manufacturing, our opportunities with SMRs, critical minerals, potash. We are a wealthy place that has much to offer to Canada, and the wonderful thing about it is that we offer it in a way that is very sustainable and are concerned about our protection of our environment. I guess what I would say as I ask you guys questions is I've heard bits and pieces of all that you are already doing. And this is something that grieves my heart quite often, is I don't feel that there is that recognition of where we are now. And as we just heard from, it was Tyler, the future plans to continue to do even more. Mr. Austin, you mentioned your frustration with the term new source of energy. Could you just elaborate briefly on that for us as to why that is an angst for you?
I think in the context of this bill, it was mentioned as a new source simply because nuclear power doesn't exist in the prairies as yet. But Canada has a long history of producing nuclear energy, close to 7 decades of being in the nuclear energy business. I believe we were the second country in the world to produce clean nuclear power. So sometimes it's important to point out to people that we have a long history in this industry. We do it very well. We're very good at it, and we are active all along the nuclear supply chain in this country.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you. And also appreciate the opportunities that I've had and my colleagues to meet with the various Indigenous businesses that are up north and that you're working with. And that's exemplary, and look forward to that growing as the opportunities increase for you guys. So I would like to ask Tyler, he was mentioning about the Guardians of the Grasslands video, which I was going to mention, and I'm glad that he did it first, quite honestly, because it is remarkable and I think would give this committee a clear understanding of how important those grasslands are. I want to just ask him, Bill C-235 focuses on emissions reduction, which is a continued focus of the government. It's a continued focus. From your perspective, what work is happening in your sector on emissions reduction, and are there other environment issues that we should be focusing on as well, or including ecosystems, biodiversity, and whatnot?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think really when talking about emissions reductions, one of we already are doing a ton of research and development in that realm, and we have been for decades, as a matter of fact. And a lot of that is because it aligns very closely with improving the efficiencies of our operations. And what I mean by that is improvement in feeding efficiency of the animals themselves, or, for example, reproductive efficiencies. That is, can we produce more beef? And we are effectively producing more beef from the same number of animals. And so by realizing those production benefits, we're actually also reducing our greenhouse gas footprint intensity for pounds of beef produced.
Also, Dr. Melanie Wolk, you were talking about, obviously, carbon sink is important in the grasslands, and can you elaborate a little bit more on how important it is to have that ranching element on our grasslands and the dynamic that plays in ensuring that we continue to grow that carbon sink in a very effective and good way?
Thank you. Yes. Grazing species, large grazing species, are extremely important in maintaining the carbon. You know, not only, as I mentioned, if we break that land up, we lose 50% of the carbon and don't get it back. We need large grazing species on those pastures. The grazing and their production on the land maintains that carbon sink, and I just think that it's often forgotten about in the part of the ecosystem, and just how much carbon is maintained in that soil.
Right. So at the Ag in Motion, which is the largest outdoor ag program in Canada, it's held in Saskatchewan. I'd encourage all the members here to make that part of a trip at some point as well. It's amazing what is going on innovatively in Saskatchewan. Canadian Food Grains were there, and they talked about the work that they're doing in Ethiopia that is a reflection of our values here in Canada, working with these small farmers that were protecting their own land for their grazing because there was so little to graze on, and eventually convinced them that they were better off to have all their animals grazing together because of the impact of those animals on increasing the pasture land. Are you familiar with that at all, as far as increasing the root systems and the amount of pasture land available in those circumstances?
Yes, we do quite a bit of grazing where it's timed grazing, you know, small pieces of land, and then the cattle are moved every few days, or however it works in that producer's system. That definitely increases the productivity of the land, and as well as the cattle. Mark, do you have something, or I'm going to ask Mark Lysing, our government relations person, to continue on with that. Mr. Chair, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he's on mute, I think, Mark.
We unfortunately can't hear you, but hopefully we can get back to you at a later time because we're out of time, Madame Wagenthal. So we'll try to figure out the sound issue and get back to you in another round of questions. Merci beaucoup. Je passerai la parole.
Thank you. Mr. Gaillard, for 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for making time for the committee. My questions are for Dr. Walk. So I was actually quite surprised by the testimony today. When someone in my shoes thinks about the beef industry, it doesn't really come across as a very green industry. Could you maybe talk about some of the steps the industry has taken maybe over the last 10 years or over the last 5 years to become more green?
Thank you. I believe Tyler answered that question very well. We haven't, through improved genetics, through improved feed efficiency, through improved grazing management, forages, we have really increased the amount of beef that we produce. In the last 20 years, we produce much more beef on much less land using much less water. So I think that probably has been our biggest contributing factor to improving our environmental impact.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned that I think it was 85% of the species on the grasslands are at risk. I understand that correlation isn't always causation, but is it some of the farming practices themselves that are leading to species loss and to habitat loss?
Definitely. I think our point here is that the loss of the grasslands, that's what those species rely on in order to survive. And as those grasslands are shrinking, whether that be from farming, from cultivating the land, or from urban spread, it's reduced the amount of land that they are able to survive on.
Yep. So I think as the socioeconomic standing of the world increases, the demand for meat also increases. So how do we reconcile that with, saving habitats, saving species, but also an increase in demand, which requires more resources, more land, more water? And what does the industry think about that?
Right, and there actually is an increase in demand for animal product, animal protein across the world. Like I said, we are continually trying to improve the amount of beef that we can produce with less land and less water. But the other thing is, the importance of having these large grazing species is because these wildlife species tend to congregate where our cattle are. So deer prefer to be on a pasture that has been grazed by cattle than to go onto a pasture where the grass is very old that hasn't been grazed. And so it's such a symbiotic relationship that we have with wildlife. It can be difficult at times because they obviously are often competing with our cattle for limited resources, but it's definitely a symbiotic relationship that we have with wildlife.
So I've also seen a documentary that sort of looked at how grazing happens in America and the open sort of ponds where defecation will go. How is the waste from the animals handled? Because you're concentrating so many animals in sort of one spot. How is it handled in your province?
Well, as far as grazing, I mean, we've got to be careful with where we graze. We can't put our animals on rivers or lakes or things like that. I mean, the manure from cattle as well as the urine acts as a mineral. Urine provides nitrogen to the soil. Provides many different benefits for the soil. So I think that question is probably more a bit in regards to intensive livestock type operations where there is a larger amount of fecal matter. And I can let Dennis, I'll go to Dennis for that.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. And as we look at the larger feeding operations, as you build those facilities, there's almost as much money spent on the actual landscaping of those operations as on the rest of the facilities. And that is all drained, so all the drainage will go directly into lagoons where the water is stored. Increasingly, you're starting now to see more biodigesters that are being built where that will then be converted into both some gas production, but you'll be effectively getting another strain of nutrients in the form of fertilizers that are coming out of it. I will say the other thing that we are seeing a lot more, there's a lot of work with Birds Canada and Ducks Unlimited And we're developing where we're setting up solar waterers so that cattle are not actually going into the sloughs or the dugouts to drink, that they're going to a waterer. And that's also helps with the nesting cycle. So there's a lot of joint projects like that that are becoming very common, not just in the prairies, but across Canada.
Great, thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Gaillard.
Thank you, Mr. Gaillard. Now I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, I'd like to point out the presence of Mr. Trudel. Remy was a MP for Temiskamika. He was one of the first individuals in my life when I was a young militant who showed me about political life, and he has had an influence on me. So thank you, Remy. Thank you for coming here. It's interesting to see you here. I'll begin with Mr. Austin. You didn't come out against to C-235. I think that you're favorable to it. What are the biggest challenges that the prairies are dealing with, and will this bill, C-235, help the provinces meet these challenges? Why or why not?
So in my view, one of the main challenges on the prairies are looking for ways to make sure that, and I'll confine my comments to the energy sector, is to make use of all forms of energy. This is not a situation where we are picking either or. We are going to need all forms of energy into the future. And I believe that C-235, in the way that it is presented in the bill, to begin discussions about how that might be able to occur, I think that that is a very reasonable approach. And you know, in the confederation that we live in, the ability of the federal government to work with their provincial counterparts, with Indigenous organizations, with industry, will play a main role in whether or not this will be successful.
What are the elements that need to be reworked in C-235? Some witnesses have talked about the bureaucratic heaviness. Do you feel that that's the case?
That's a difficult question because as I read the bill, there is a significant amount of consultation and discussion that is part of that in order to come to what would be a final conclusion. I think that there are ways to manage the bureaucratic burden, if I can put it that way, provided that each of the participants, governments, industry, Indigenous groups, go into the discussion with the desire to have a successful outcome. As with any bill where you're asking people to come together over the course of a number of years to pull together a framework, there are opportunities, frankly, to put it on a siding. But if each participant goes into it with their eyes open, with the objective to come out with a plan for a green economy, then I think that that is perfectly manageable.
Vous représentez un secteur.
You represent a sector that comes under natural resources, under provincial jurisdiction. So the federal government wants to play a key economic driver in this bill. Do you think that the addition of these actors will create a heavier burden if that's the case?
I don't believe that's the intention. That's the intention of the bill at all. I believe that the intention of the bill is to work together to come up with a plan to have a green economy in the prairies that is successful, that minimizes the economic impacts of, in our case, energy and resource development, and also increases the economic potential of the prairies in the case of of energy development. And if that is the objective of the bill, then I think that that's a viable objective and one that we should be looking to attain.
Vous considérez
From what I understand from your opening statement, the nuclear sector is part of the new green technology. Is that the way you see it?
That is certainly what we believe as a company, that nuclear must play a significant role in any transition to a green economy. It will underpin the necessary electrification of those economies.
Est-ce que présentement,
Right now, are there any pieces of legislation that will prevent you from putting your nuclear expertise to work?
I wouldn't say that there are any that prevent it. Our nuclear regulator here in Canada, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, is a world-class regulator. They do an excellent job of maintaining the safety of the nuclear system. We are watching with very closely the Impact Assessment Act and the implementation of that act by the agency in terms of timelines for developing new projects that, in our case, would include potentially new uranium mines in northern Saskatchewan and the amount of time that might take. So are there regulations that are preventing it? I would say no, but we are watching very closely the amount of time that getting through that regulatory system might take.
je vous cache pas que les
Nuclear energy scares me. I won't hide that from you. I think there has been a lot of catastrophes. What do you say to someone like me who is afraid of nuclear energy here in Canada?
Well, I'm sorry that you're afraid of nuclear energy, frankly. It is, I think, a demonstrated safe supplier of electricity around the world. Here in Ontario, where we are sitting, 60% of the electricity being generated is being generated by nuclear power. As I mentioned in my remarks to Ms. Wagenthal, Canada has a long history of developing and producing nuclear energy, and we expect that to continue long into the future. We also believe that there is no path to net zero without nuclear power. We will require all forms of energy to get there, but nuclear energy has the potential to provide that clean, zero-emission baseload power that is required.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Lemire, Monsieur Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Lemire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for our witnesses. I'll start with the Alberta beef producers. I commend your efforts with the tall grass prairies. We have them in Windsor. There's only 2 places left in North America. My private member's bill looks to protect them. They're just city land right now, but they're very rare and they're very delicate. Want to get specifically from you, do you support Bill C-235 and as in specifics, and if not, why, and if there is improvements that could be made to the bill? That's kind of what we're figuring out right here is whether or not this is actually an improvement. So I'd like your opinion on that.
As far as the beef producers of this province, we are focused on continually improving the sustainability of our industry, and that was why we were very happy to be a part of this discussion today. Sustainability, we would like for it to consider the environment, social responsibility, and economic viability. I think Tyler made a very good point that it has to be economically viable for us to pursue. We are constantly evolving as an industry, and we look forward to continuing to do so. Being here today was really to emphasize the importance of the grasslands and the importance that they have with the environment, and we really can't afford to have them shrink anymore.
So, but does that mean you then support the bill, or like I appreciate that this actually has been really interesting testimony because it's highlighted, I think, something doesn't get a lot of attention. It's new testimony for me, but do you support the bill, or there's a couple amendments in the bill, or you just don't know? It's okay. It's not, I'm not trying to pin you down on anything in particular, but we're trying to figure out exactly, where we all stand on this one. So, please.
So that's the difficult part for us, right? Is there wasn't a whole lot of agriculture in the bill. There's a lot that's related to forestry. So I'm going to say right now, we're just trying to make sure that we are at the table and able to give our input into how this bill could possibly work for our producers.
Okay, and that, just so you know, that's a very fair answer. What we've kind of discovered through the process, even with, when we had Mr. Carr here as well, there hadn't been a lot of outreach to organizations. So you're not alone, and we're just your testimony is very valuable. You don't have to take a position right now. That's up for us to decide later on what we do here. Maybe I can shift over to Mr. Austin with nuclear power. There's also responsibility of what takes place afterwards. So I've been involved in the nuclear deep repository that is in the Bruce area. It's causing quite an issue. Are you aware of the legacy costs there? And like when you're looking at nuclear now, this is like the United States has asked us to stop doing it there because we're building a deep repository that they oppose right next to the Great Lakes, and the costing hasn't been factored in. So is there a plan to do that differently? The whole community is ripped apart. In fact, the Saugeen First Nations, what happened is that they rejected it, and then so what ended up happening is that they decided now to go next door to them and try to do it. So maybe is the model that they're dealing with now, is there anything in there in terms of new nuclear that's going to take account to all these things that weren't planned for? And so this is a lot of it used to be secondary stuff, like it's your coats, your chairs, your everything that's all got radioactive and other stuff. So please.
So I won't comment on the deep geologic repository and the discussions that are happening in Bruce because that's not I'm not familiar enough to comment. But I will say in terms of the discussion of spent fuel or nuclear waste, however you do it, it is a fully costed part of any nuclear facility. So the costing of dealing with our spent fuel or nuclear waste is already factored into the costs. It is stored safely on site at nuclear power plants in Canada, has been for many decades. If and when there is a deep geologic repository that is built, then that will be a safe storage and retrieval opportunity for spent fuel. Retrieval is important because we use very little of the energy in a fuel bundle when it goes through a nuclear reactor. There are new technologies being developed that may be able to reuse that fuel and put it back and generate fuel. So it is fully managed, well monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and will continue that will continue to occur in the absence of a deep geologic repository.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think there's the fourth one in the world just came online. The three others, two of them caught on fire. This is the length of the CN Tower into the ground next to the Great Lakes, so there's a lot of concern with it. Okay, it's good to hear about the costing, and that's all my questions for now, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much to the witnesses. Appreciate the testimony.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Massé.
Thank you, Mayor Massey. We now turn the floor over to Mr. Crombie.
Today, and Mr. Austin, it's good to have you here in person. I'll begin with you. So Cameco is certainly checking a lot of check boxes that governments tend to look for. You're already transitioning to a low carbon economy. You talked about Indigenous partnerships and businesses that you're already working with. And then Bill C-235 comes along and refers to nuclear power as a new form of energy. So I'm wondering, what do you really need from Bill C-235 to continue the work that you're doing, or would it be easier if the government just stayed out of your way and did not add a new level of bureaucratic burden that you have to deal with?
Fair question. Thank you very much. So we could continue on our way and continue to do the good work that we're doing. We are firm believers that anytime we can talk about our industry, the role that it plays in Western Canada and in Saskatchewan in particular, that's useful. And if there are tables where the federal government and the provincial government can sit down and work together with industry, those are also useful. It is, as you know, sometimes challenging for all levels of government, industry, Indigenous groups, the public, to get on the same page. This is an important issue. And an opportunity to have frank conversations about what might be possible is useful. Could we do it without it? yes, we probably could, but we would end up, or someone else would end up being a convener of this type of conversation.
Would it be possible to have these conversations without the legislation?
I would say yes, it would be possible to have them without the legislation. The legislation puts a finer point on, at least from my point of view, the legislation puts a finer point on the need and the desire to have these types of conversations among the various interested parties.
Now, you did mention the Impact Assessment Act and some concerns about the timelines that projects can take stemming from the Impact Assessment Act. Now, I tend to be of the view that everyone comes to politics with good intentions, and there isn't the intention to add an additional layer of bureaucratic burden. But with the Impact Assessment Act and with Bill C-235, could we agree that there is at least the potential for additional bureaucratic burden as an unintended consequence?
That is fair to say, yes. I think as an unintended consequence, yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. Could you elaborate a little bit on the Indigenous partnerships that Cameco has for your business and how you established these partnerships in the first place? Was it, how did that all come about?
So it's been a long time coming. Over the entire more than 30-year existence of Cameco, we have been working with our local Indigenous communities. It has been a long journey to get to where we are. We have been remarkably successful, I would say, in developing these relationships, but it has not been easy. So currently we have 18 communities in northern Saskatchewan that are part of Cameco's collaboration or partnership agreements. They are based on 5 pillars: community engagement, business development, community investment, environmental stewardship, and workforce development. We cannot operate where we do in northern Saskatchewan without the support of our Indigenous communities. They provide, as I said, a significant amount of services, and they are a very reliable workforce that we require. It takes time, it's based on trust, and it's based on open dialogue.
So would it be fair to say that you achieved this success because of mutually beneficial economic interests and not necessarily to comply with any particular federal government law or program?
I would say it's more than mutually beneficial economic interests. I would say there are mutually beneficial economic, environmental, social. It runs the gamut. We identified early on that without the support of the northern communities, we would not be successful, and that is why we pursued it.
Okay, but it wasn't to comply with this law or that law. Is that fair to say?
I would say no.
Okay, and I think I'm out of time, Mr. Chair. Okay.
Yes, you are. Thank you, Mr. Cram. We'll now move to MP Dung for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for coming to the committee today. I first of all, I want to say that you're doing something very wise to join early in the process to give us advice on this very important bill. This is one of the few meetings we've had and heard from different aspects. To me, the core or the spirit of this bill is development and consultation, so that you're doing the right thing to be here and give us advice. We've heard, well, first of all, I just want to, so it's on the record, everyone's clear. I want to hear from all witnesses. Do you believe that this bill is going to build collaboration, perhaps cooperation between provincial, federal, and municipal and industry partners to benefit the future prosperity of the prairies? Maybe one by one, witness can give me a very short answer.
I can go ahead and start. I believe it has
my fault.
I believe it has the potential to do that.
Okay. Ms. Walk?
Yes, I would hope so, that anytime this type of collaboration is what we need all the different sectors to come together, and especially for us being here, is developing some understanding of our business and what we're doing and for our part. It's very good for me to see what everybody else is doing as well. So definitely.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think, as I said in my statement, this consultation process we see as really critical, because we do see we struggle with making those connections and making sure that all parts of Canada and in particular urban areas understand the importance of cattle on the landscape, and all of the great environmental benefits that come from that. So as I mentioned in my statement, we are the landscape, the prairie landscape experts. And so to start with, I think that's the way to start.
Thank you. Mr. Leeson, and followed by Mr. Laycraft.
Yeah, I think I agree with Mel and what she said, in that it does provide that opportunity. I think just as worded, we would like to see a more recognition of agriculture and a broader sweep of partners who might have been missed on this draft. But overall, like, collaboration, especially within our industry, is never a bad thing.
Thank you. Mr. Laycraft?
Yeah, not a lot more to add to that. I think it certainly has the potential to facilitate that level of collaboration. And as you go to our national strategy, one of our key pillars is connectivity. And when we harness that power of connectivity, that's when we definitely get the greatest results.
Great. My second big question is that we've heard a lot of concerns about this bill may lead to potential red tape for your industries. And to avoid that from happening, do you have any specific recommendations to this committee how perhaps we can amend this bill so we will stop that from happening, at least from the start with the bill?
Maybe I'll make one quick comment. Empowering people always has greater success than overpowering people. So the incentive-based approach is absolutely crucial to success.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to echo the exact same thing, in that, beyond, a greater consultative process, providing, incentives as opposed to, regulatory, restrictions, I think is a much more effective way, especially in the context of environmental benefits.
Good point. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I think my advice would be that to avoid unintended consequences. So example would be beef producers have done a good job of sequestering and storing carbon, and incentivizing other practices but not rewarding the good actors right now always leaves a bad taste in those producers' mouths.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, MP Dong. This is all the time we had, but we might have some time at the end, so keep that question in mind. Je passerai la parole à Monsieur Lemire pour 2 minutes.
Mr. Lemire, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Austin, I'd like to continue questioning you. Could you reassure us with respect to the security of nuclear residue or waste? Where are we today?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I just missed the middle.
Could you talk to us about the security of nuclear waste? You want to have a better production in the nuclear industry, but one of the byproducts is nuclear waste. How do we deal with this waste, and how can we be sure that it's safe for us?
So as I mentioned earlier, we are already safely storing spent fuel on site at nuclear power plants here in Canada. That waste is monitored 24 hours a day, 365 days a year by the International Atomic Energy Agency. It is fully costed. There is no reason to suspect that it will be any different as we continue to produce nuclear power into the future. So there is a safe storage capability that exists in Canada right now, and we will continue to avail ourselves of it.
Parce que le nucléaire.
Because nuclear energy is not necessarily that flexible. In this particular context, we know that the consequences of a nuclear accident could be disastrous. Those who are against nuclear energy are worried about health, about storage. How would you answer these people with respect to the impact of the nuclear energy on the health of individuals, the capacity to really control everything on a site is almost impossible and obviously this has an impact on the environment. What do you say to people who are against this because of health reasons?
What I would say to those people is that here in Ontario, again where this meeting is taking place, nuclear energy replaced coal as one of the major electricity producers in this province. And during that transition from coal to nuclear, the number of smog days in Toronto went from roughly 40 to 50 a year down to zero. And it has been consistently at zero since coal was replaced in Ontario. So there are benefits, greenhouse gas benefits certainly, but also air quality benefits to the transition to nuclear power. We recognize that there are concerns with nuclear energy. We work very hard to try and allay those concerns, but there will always be people that, like yourself, fear our technology, and we will try to work with you to try and allay some of your fears, because we believe it is a certain part of any net zero future.
Je me suis permis de vous poser des questions de bonne foi.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Monsieur Massé pour.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't get a chance to ask the Canadian Cattle Association on specifically to C235 if they support the. I think that they do, but I just want to make sure they get an opportunity to respond as well too.
Well, I'd say that we really, as cattle producers, consider ourselves to be the original environmentalists, and so to that degree, when you see a bill that has green economy for the prairies in particular, it seems to check a lot of boxes for us. But of course, the devil would be in the details.
So is it less about the bill and more about consultation, or is it about the bill creating this more structured consultation? Like, is it fair to put it that way? Is it, even if take the bill out of the equation, you still want better consultation, a better process, but you're intrigued. Is it fair enough to say you're intrigued by the potential of the bill?
Yeah. To both points, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. I will turn the floor now over to Ms. Wangato. You have 5 minutes.
So I appreciate listening here to the conversation going on at this moment, and we're hearing a lot about consultation. So the bill actually says in developing the framework, the minister must consult governments, all the ministers, Indigenous bodies, and the private sector. I am concerned because the responsibility for developing the framework is with the federal government. And what I'm hearing is that you'll be consulted, which is a step forward. I honestly say that. For the elephant in the room, The reality is that in my province, and I think the prairie provinces, have not felt heard, listened to, respected in regard to the work that, and this is what I'm hearing from you today, especially the cattlemen, and as well, I think, with Mr. Austin, that you do a great deal and continue to do a great deal. And so if there's opportunity for communication and to work together, that's a good thing. However, I'm reading a note from this past summer when the federal government met in Saskatoon with territorial and provincial counterparts and stakeholders to develop what's known as the Agriculture Policy Framework, because the federal government does have a role. And they discussed how governments can help the agriculture industry reduce its greenhouse gas emission and become more climate resilient. Those are great words, good words, and yet I hear from you all of the things that you have been doing for a long time, Cattlemen's Association, and yet there's been no recognition of that in this process of developing this green prairies concept. What I hear from you is incentives are important, rather than being denied opportunity to consult and to be part of the process and to do what you know best. So am I hearing you right on that? To some degree, I know it's a tricky circumstance. You're being asked if you support this bill today. I think what I'm hearing is you want to support working together, and that needs to be done, but there's also a certain level of accountability that belongs to my province, for sure, in Saskatchewan, in developing the resources that are there that, of course, make a difference in this entire country when it comes to our GDP and the wealth of our nation. So I would ask, first of all, the Cattlemen's Association folks, how important is that whole area of incentives? They say here they want to do a pilot for those who adopt environmental practices that also reduce production risks. And I can't think of any other business that is more concerned about the environment and ensuring they protect that environment while also reducing risks to their production. Is that?
I think you fully understand the cattle sector in across Canada. I'll add one item that hasn't been mentioned previously, and that, you know, one of the other environmental goods that come from cattle on the landscape is that we make the landscape more resilient to climate change by virtue of protecting against fires through, and we actually have a good video resource for that as well, or flooding. I can reference it directly from Manitoba this year, that it is those pasture lands that that make the whole landscape more resilient to the effects of climate change. And so to go back to the you know, your point about incentives, it's really more about recognition, as Mark mentioned earlier. Recognition for the fact that these are the awesome environmental benefits that come from having cattle on the landscape, and they're just not going to be there if we as cattle farmers and ranchers aren't there.
To reach out to you, as you say, you really are, you're the experts. And I know there was a case where the grasslands grazing was shut down because there was a concern of how it was impacting other species. And they especially mentioned the grouse. And then here, when you get that grass growing as tall as it was, because historically grasslands have been grazed, the grouse left. It was not a beneficial thing to shut down the grazing on those grasslands. Are you familiar with that kind of a concept?
Yeah, absolutely. You're referencing in particular the national park, Grasslands National Park in southern Saskatchewan, that took them a decade to understand the importance of that symbiosis. And it's one,
right?
It's a thing.
Sorry, the ranchers had already understood that.
Yeah, and exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Sorry. Okay.
No, so yeah, you've captured it.
Anything else from those that participated this morning on the ranching side of the equation? It's true, there's not enough reference here to our grasslands and how crucial they are to our environment, healthy environment. Sure, go ahead.
No, you. Well,
I
if
just
you,
want.
I'm
sorry.
go ahead, Madam Wook.
Sorry.
I just want to add that being asked to this, oftentimes we're put in a defensive position of the things that people think that we are doing, you know, and defending ourselves. And it's just been very refreshing to come here and to be able to explain the good things that we do and the good things that our cattle do, and how important the environment is to us and to our businesses. And I would just like to thank the committee for that.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Mr. Fillmore for our last 5 minutes of questions.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much to the witnesses in person and virtually for joining us with your time and your expertise today. It's been a fascinating discussion. I've spent a great deal of time on the small modular reactor file, and I agree with you. I think it's going to be a part of our green mix in the future. But the grassland conversation has been entirely new to me, and I'm really happy to learn about the cattle industry and about the importance of the grassland. So thank you for enlightening us in that way. Now, we are living in a time when extreme weather events and natural disasters are increasing in severity and frequency. In my part of the country, we just lived through Hurricane Fiona. On the other coast, heat domes, forest fires. And in your part of the world, it's drought. And we know that cattle ranchers have faced critical shortages of feed and water, and they're supplying their herds for the winter. So I just sort of like to do the poll between the three witness groups. Would you agree that we do need to recognize the importance of building a green economy in the prairies to combat the climate change that is creating this hardship for the cattle producers? Maybe we'll start with the Alberta group, please.
Definitely, we agree that we have to be a part of this conversation, but you know, at the end of the day, we have to remember that beef production in Canada represents 2.4% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. So, you know, oftentimes we look at that, but we forget and that's part of the reason why we came here. We've forgotten about the other end of the equation, which is where someone like myself sits, the cow-calf producer, and what we're doing with carbon and what we're doing with grasslands and what we're doing with trees and everything else. And so that's our part of the reason for being here, is that, you know, even though we are just such a small part of it, we are still continually willing to try and work towards improving it.
Thanks for that. And if we could go to the Canada Cattle Association, you know, just on the question of the hardship that your industry is facing because of extreme weather, drought, and so forth, flood, and your feelings on whether what this bill proposes would mitigate that through efforts to green the economy and mitigate the impacts of climate change.
Yeah, so we're living climate change. It seems weekly, or if not, you know, annually. And I can say that you know, the eastern part of the prairies was impacted by pretty significant flooding this year as well. So we're just seeing major shifts one way or the other, and so critically, we need systems that make us all more resilient. And you know, and to the degree that this bill would help with that, we're definitely supportive.
Speaking of systems, one of the elements of the bill is to work together to improve transportation systems. Would you then agree that we need to recognize the importance of improving transportation systems so that we can distribute food and water supplies in a much more predictable manner, and then of course get the product to market when that time comes? And let's again start with the Alberta group.
Transportation is a nightmare for us right now, whether it's getting our cattle around or whether it's getting feed to cattle. I don't know if everybody remembers the potential rail strike that we possibly faced last December, which really scared us. So definitely transportation is something that we have to look at. It just seems that, you know, post-COVID, it's just gone into a tailspin, and we are definitely looking for help in that area as well.
Okay, thanks. And the Canadian Cattle Association?
Yeah, as I said, our members are living it. I would also reference the rail failures that happened when the heavy flooding happened in the Lower Mainland and in BC, even the interior BC, after the droughts and forest fires last year. That really upended the supply chain for many of our members. And so those types of, I guess, strategic infrastructure investments are critical to being more resilient to our changing climate.
Thanks for that. And if anyone else on the screen would like to jump in there, I'll create an opportunity on building the importance of building a green economy or improving transportation systems.
Yeah, maybe if I can jump in then. I did put my hand up. One of the things, it isn't all just infrastructure. And as we move on this, I know one company that has 40 trucks that are sitting today because they cannot get drivers. So, all these other things are important, but we do need to address that labor issue. And it's very critical, not across Canada, but I know it's very critical in the prairies where you've got vast distances where products do need to be transported.
Thanks for that. A couple another.
You can go.
I've directed the question so far to the grasslands, but Mr. Austin, if any of those, if you have any comment on any of that, would be great.
Just very quickly on green economy, not only important in the prairies, important across the country. The more that we can remove carbon from our economy, the more global opportunities are going to be available to us. In terms of transportation, we're a trading nation. We need to be able to move our goods to market as quickly as possible, and we need to have the right regulatory and policy frameworks in place to make sure that that can happen. So anytime that we can, look with a fresh eye on all of the components of what moving goods to market in a green economy might look like, I think that's beneficial.
Thank you very much. So given that we had a bit of a change of schedule, we have a little more time. So, but we've concluded our formal round of questions. So anyone who has any more questions, I will cede the floor to. So Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay? Can you?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to ask a few questions. Mine will be all directed to Mr. Austin. Mr. Austin, when your company wants to or needs to alter or develop a new site for mining or production of uranium, does it and do you consult with stakeholders before doing that?
Would consult in particular with our partner communities in northern Saskatchewan, but with other interested parties as well.
And so could you just inform the committee what types of stakeholders you'd be talking to?
Well, I mean, as I said, it would be most likely with our Indigenous community. We would talk to the regulator, both provincial and federal regulator. There would be an open consultation process that goes along with that sort of regulatory siting process.
And would so you'd be dealing with all three levels of government as well in that consultation process?
Yes, that is correct.
And of course, part of that is what you would naturally want to do as being a good corporate citizen to move the project forward. I presume, so, particularly with First Nations, some of that is in compliance with the duty to consult rulings of the courts?
Yes, it is part of the duty to consult, but we have been engaged in discussions, consultations with our Indigenous partners before that became part of the law. It is part of how we do business in northern Saskatchewan.
And is any of that required already by the various regulators you have to deal with?
So they required is I wouldn't say it is required. It is certainly required from a company perspective. As part of the regulatory process, there is an opportunity for any engaged group to participate in that regulatory process that is run by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission.
And how long would the consultation that your company would initiate, and it probably depends on the project, take to do that?
It's hard to put a hard number on it. If I could say that, you know, we would engage in discussions, consultations as long as they were required, to make sure that in particular our partner communities were comfortable with the project that we were putting forward.
And has the bill that my colleague Mr. Cram referred to earlier, as known most publicly as C-68, has that lengthened the process and the hurdles your company has to go through?
We don't know yet. So we have not attempted to put a project through the impact assessment process. So it is hard for us to comment. We are watching very carefully other companies that are making their way through the process to see if the timelines are met. But from Cameco's perspective, I can't say.
So because of all that, I'm still trying to grapple with the issue of whether or not this bill actually does anything that you're not already doing, or if it does, that it adds yet another layer of complexity to what companies in your situation and the prairies are already doing. It seems to me to be a bureaucratization, perhaps, of something that any good and reasonable company needs to do these days to get any project going forward. I just don't see how adding another layer of a federal government directed process on top of everything else you're doing does anything but slow down our ability to develop projects, or in the end of the day, may even deter capital from flowing to projects in Western Canada because of that added bureaucracy.
So perhaps I misinterpreted the bill, but I saw this as a time-limited process to develop a framework for a green economy in the prairies, that it would not add a significant amount of bureaucratic oversight. But I will take another look at the bill. As I said earlier, any time that the relevant players can get together to discuss a framework for developing a green economy, it's probably worthwhile to think about what the outcome is and whether or not the interested parties are looking to achieve similar objectives. So I will take a closer look at the bill, but my understanding was very time limited, develop a framework, and then from there we could continue to, we would look at what that framework proposed and then determine how it would fit into the process that we engage in when we're looking at new projects.
Well, sections 2 and 3 outlined a very specific process, and I do not see, although I could be wrong, that there is any time limits in the bill placed on it. So if there isn't, presumably that is something you think should be added to the bill, perhaps at committee stage, if that's not there.
I would think so. And when I say that, I was looking in Section 4.1, within 18 months after the day in which this act comes into force, the minister must prepare a report. So those were the time limits that we were considering. Certainly I was considering in terms of the time-limited nature of this.
So would you see this as an additional consultation process, or would it substitute for what you're already doing?
No, I would see this as an additional consultation process to what we're already doing.
So potentially adding another 18 months to any project then?
No, not necessarily. I wouldn't see this as adding to any project timeline. We would be concurrently looking at projects while this bill or the framework was being developed. So yeah, I don't see it as cumulative. I certainly see it as concurrent timing in terms of whatever it is we might be doing in terms of a new project and being participants in the consultation in the development of the framework.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Austin. Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins. We'll move to Madam Wagenthal.
Very much, Chair. I just had one follow-up question actually for Ms. Wolk. You spoke of the percentage of greenhouse gases that are a result of ranching in Canada. Is that the 2-point-something% of Canada's total impact on greenhouse gases globally?
Total Canadian greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, because so we're at between 2 and 3% globally responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. So you're saying 2% of that, 2 or 3%. Okay, clarity for me. That's appreciated. So when we talk about transportation in this bill, it's talking more about small cities and communities, which I know for Saskatchewan we have no transportation systems in regard to busing people from point A to point B, which is what seems to be the focus of this, and it's not a realistic possibility at this point in time. However, when you come to transporting livestock and dealing with all of the dynamics around your industry, what are the biggest challenges for you in regard to transportation?
Right now, the biggest issue is trying to find people to drive. There has been some changes in the transport regulations in regard to transporting livestock across the country. And that's one thing, perhaps, is another thing that's not understood about our industry is there's continual movement of cattle from one end of the country to the other, from north to south with our American neighbors. So that is our biggest issue right now is labor, like it is, I think, with every other industry in this country right now. You just cannot find the drivers. We are currently going into our fall season, which is extremely busy for trucking. Our calves go to market and then they are distributed to those people that will continue to feed them. It takes a lot of trucking, and we're up against not having enough, and you know it can at the end result in an animal welfare issue. We cannot have those cattle standing at auction markets for days, or you know they need to be moving. And so the question is it's such a big issue because of labor for everybody that nobody seems to have a good answer about how we're going to solve that.
Right. So labor for the ranching industry, or is this also including the access to individuals who own the trucks to do the transportation, or is this more within your own?
No, this is the trucking companies. As Dennis said, there is a trucking company in Alberta right now sitting with 40 empty trucks because they cannot find anybody to drive them.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see MP Dong. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. I heard the question about transportation. I also had a question on that as well, because I remember in 2018, Greyhound Canada announced to cancel service in several regions in Canada, including the prairies. So, but I also know that Clause 3A of this Bill C-235 calls for addressing the limited and non-existent transportation option in small cities and communities and advancing innovation solutions for public transportation service in those cities and communities. I know this may not directly related to your industry or the group that you're representing, but it is a transportation for workers, for residents. It does matter quite a bit in the future development of these communities. And I think it adds to predictability when it comes to municipalities and province, federal government coming to the same table and lay out the plan for public transit. I just want to hear from the witnesses your thoughts on this particular clause, and do you think it will perhaps help to draw a blueprint for public transit option for the prairies?
I think the question for me that's difficult to answer is what do you consider large enough for public transport? So where we pick up our mail, there's 2 people that live there. I drive, an hour for groceries. And so that's where my question becomes. And I think that's a real misunderstanding. When they were talking about taxing these large trucks, trucks over 0.5 ton more, for somebody in our situation where we need that for a way of life, we need that to get around, we need that for our trailers, things like that. That's where that question becomes difficult to answer. So is it a community of 10,000 that you're looking at improving transportation, and is it within that community, or is it transporting people from, say, a town that's 30 miles away, there's 500 people that live there, but yet they're going to another town 30 miles away, that's got 20,000 people where it's actually where they work. So it's actually quite a complicated question, and I just don't think that a lot of people really realize how rural can be.
No, I completely appreciate your point of view. Perhaps where I was coming from is perhaps a replacement or improvement of the Greyhound service, which was taken away. There are individuals that they struggle and they may not have means for transportation. They rely on these public transportation options. So anybody else thank you, Melanie, for your input. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Just very briefly, I would echo everything that Melanie just said, and that I think important in addressing the labor shortage that we have in rural areas. A piece of that puzzle might be more accessible transportation. The reality is, it's a struggle to attract new Canadian workers and maintain, and keep them in rural areas, and that could be part of the picture, is those transportation bottlenecks.
Mr. Austin?
Different take on this question, but in some of our partner communities where we operate, they are fly-in, fly-out communities. So public transit in that context is in fact a road to connect them to the south and to health services and groceries and all of those things. So I heard from my fellow witnesses today about the complexity of this question and public transportation. It means very different things depending on where you are and what your needs are. So I just wanted to make that point.
Very good point. Thank you, Chair. That's all my questions.
Thank you, MP Dong. And yeah, I think we'll remember that quotation. Some people don't realize how rural can be. I took good note of it, coming from an urban riding. Monsieur Lemire, la parole est à vous.
Mr. Lemire, I do share your point of view, Mr. Chair. My question can be answered by the representative from the beef industry. Maybe Mr. Fulton could answer. With the increase in floods in the prairies, I understand that there is a problem of diversification in the prairies. Can you tell us about the impact of the cattle industry in this, and are there any solutions to this problem? Does this concern you?
Thank you so much for the question, and we really do see the cattle sector as providing that really important diversified landscape that provides resilience against flooding and droughts. I'll give you an example of a drought scenario. A lot of crops that were not feasible for human consumption was redirected in use to the livestock sector, and in particular to the cattle sector, and which was made the whole system more resilient, and that only happens when you have that diversified landscape. So there's not just the aspects of slowing, for example, slowing water that is flooding on pastures that can actually take up more moisture than what tilled land can. But it's also just providing more resilience to the economy, the rural economy, by having that diversification.
One of the aspects, going back to what Mrs. Wolf said, in a rural region in the cattle industry, access to slaughterhouses is a problem. In Alberta or elsewhere in the prairies, we understand that access to a slaughterhouse would be important within a distance of, 200 to 300 miles away, correct?
Definitely our consumers are moving towards, farm to plate type movement. A lot of people like to know where their beef comes from and where it is processed. Right now, we definitely do have a bottleneck in our processing capacity. There's 2 large plants that process 80% of Canada's beef, and that is in our province. There's a big backlog in trying to get your farm beef done. Kids with 4-H calves, they're waiting up to a year. To get into a small to medium-sized processor in our province is taking up to a year and a half that you have to book. Very difficult to do because those cattle have to be ready when they're ready. And so we definitely, our provincial government is currently working on an economic study in regards to the processing capacity of our province and determining what the best steps forward will be as to improving capacity and allowing people to perhaps have more of a local type processing facility available to them. 200 to 300 miles, probably, yeah, pretty good.
Because this is a situation that we have in Temiskaming. Our producers have to go up to 800 kilometers in order to have their cattle slaughtered. And there's nothing in the funds set aside by the federal government that can assist in the construction of a slaughterhouse. Mrs. Wolk, you talked about farm to plate and thinking about the consumer's needs as a result. Shouldn't there be some type of special fund that would enable this type of slaughterhouse to be built so that all producers would have some type of slaughterhouse that's fairly close to them? Do you feel that the federal government should provide for something like that?
As far as funding for packing houses in the province, it depends on whether federally or they're provincially inspected. So most of the ones in the province are provincially inspected, so they fall under provincial jurisdiction. And so I think that's where the issue comes in. It would be nice to have more federal plants, because then that increases our ability to sell to other provinces, to sell to other parts of the world. Boy, if we could see that, that would answer a lot of prayers for a lot of people, because it is becoming very difficult from us. The only other thing I'm going to add is it'd be great to build them. It would be great to have them running, but can we find the people to work there? The 2 big plants are telling us right now that they do not have the worker capacity that they need to run full tilt. And I know for sure that the smaller guys, we've got one in our area, very, very difficult to find labor.
I understand your concern for the scarcity of workforce. How is the demand, consumer demand, to remain active? Do you need to build slaughterhouses in the more rural areas, to use your words? This could apply to all kinds of industry with respect to livestock, no?
We have had this conversation a lot in Alberta in regards to perking up our rural economy, bringing people back to rural Alberta, bringing small business back. I mean, definitely a processing plant is a small business that could bring a lot of people to rural Alberta, and that is definitely one thing that would, I believe, help us out. It would help out the beef industry as well, but the question becomes again, where does it fall under? Does it fall under provincial jurisdiction, which I think most of them would? So the federal funding, kind of really isn't a question for us unless we're looking at building another federal plant. I think Dennis had something to add.
Yeah, I was going to add 2 comments. First of all, on the distances, we very efficiently can move cattle long distances, and we've had an exceptionally positive ability to do that in getting animals there in excellent condition. So Canada is a huge country, second largest in the world. So, that's just part of what we need to do with the great spaces that our industry occupies. But we export half of what we produce. So you need both. You need the large plants and you need that mixture of smaller plants. If we're trying to sell to a large retailer in another country, if you're not one of the large plants, you actually can't produce enough beef to take care of their weekly requirements. So like all things, you need a mixture to create the most competitive system possible and deal with some of the regional challenges you referred to.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Lemire et Madame Lapointe.
Thank you, Mr. Lemire. Ms. Lapointe.
I feel a need to tell you that my father worked in the uranium mines in Elliott Lake. That's where I was born. And then we moved to Sudbury when I was 2, and where he worked in the nickel mines. So earlier this week on Tuesday, this committee heard from Mr. Gil McGowan, who is president of the Alberta Federation of Labour. And that federation represents 28 affiliated unions and over 170,000 workers across Alberta. In a recent report, Mr. McGowan recommends that the province, and I'm going to quote him directly, skates to where the puck is going, and says this is a once-in-a-century opportunity to establish new industries in Alberta. So I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on this approach to economic diversification and development.
It would be. It's.
Go ahead.
For me, it's getting the people here and setting up an environment where people can be competitive in what they're doing, right? We have to be able to bring these people here and say to them, you're going to be able to make a living doing this. This is going to be profitable for you. When you move into this community, there's going to be a doctor, there's going to be a dentist, there's going to be a hospital, there's going to be a veterinarian. And we just can't do that yet. Being a veterinarian, the shortage we have in Alberta right now, there's almost 400 veterinarians needed in Alberta today. And that's not just for large animal, that's for companion animal as well. So we've had the discussion with these communities, but the problem is they want all these other things as well. And so the question becomes, where does the money come to develop all of these things that people are asking for when they come to rural Alberta?
Thank you. Mr. Austin?
Economic diversification is important, but I would say, just to extend your metaphor a little bit, skating to where the puck is going doesn't necessarily mean that you need to put what you're doing on the bench. It can mean that you look at the industries that you have currently in a province, in a country, and examine ways to make them more innovative. Look at ways to reduce their carbon emissions so that they continue to produce in ways that are going to be beneficial in a new economy. So I think that there's a combination there where, yes, economic diversification is important, but we should not limit Canada's economic future simply to new industries. We have a long history, long successful history in many, many industries here that through innovative techniques and new technology could continue to deliver economic benefits for many decades to come.
Thank you.
Merci. Merci. Je pense qu'il y a plus.
I thank you. I don't think there are any further questions, so I'd like to thank my colleagues and Thank you to the witnesses for being so flexible today. You've really accommodated us. It's much appreciated, and I wish you a good evening. And thank you to the interpreters and all the other people as well. Thank you.
Thank you.